The night of the coronation moon was supposed to be the most important night of Elena Vasquez's life, and in a way, it was. Just not in the way anyone expected. The great hall of the Nightfall Pack was carved from old stone and older pride. Its high windows opened to the sky, so the moonlight could pour in and bless the new king. Hundreds of wolves stood shoulder to shoulder in their finest clothes, waiting for the moment their alpha king, Kale Draven, would claim his throne and his fated queen in the same breath. Elena stood near the back, in a plain dark green dress, feeling like she did not belong among the silk and gold of the front rows. She was a healer, not a noble. She had spent her nights setting broken bones and easing fevers in the lower quarters of the territory, not attending banquets. She had not expected to be noticed at all. Then Kale's eyes found hers across the circle, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Everyone felt it, the old pull of fate, the invisible thread that marked two wolves as mates. Kale was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of quiet authority that made rooms fall silent when he walked in. He was already king in every way but the ceremony itself, and now, apparently, he had found his queen. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The elder council, seated on a raised platform draped in silver cloth, exchanged pleased glances. This was exactly how the old stories were supposed to go. The king finds his mate on the night of his coronation, and the pack is blessed for a generation. Kale crossed the floor toward her, his expression unreadable, and the crown-bearer followed a step behind him, holding a circlet of pale silver on a velvet cushion. He stopped in front of Elena. Up close, she could see uncertainty flicker behind his composed face, as if he too had not expected this. "Elena Vasquez," he said, low enough that only those nearby could hear. "I did not know." "Neither did I," she admitted. He held out his hand, and the crown-bearer lifted the circlet toward her. The entire hall waited for her to step forward, kneel, and accept both the king and the crown in the way tradition demanded. Elena did not move. She looked past Kale, at the sea of watching faces, the elder council with their satisfied smiles, and she thought of every wolf she had treated in the years before this night, the young ones beaten in training for being too slow, the Omegas who came to her in secret because they were ashamed to ask for help through proper channels, the mother, who had begged her not to report a cruelty because the pack's hierarchy punished victims as easily as it punished wrongdoers. She thought of a system that crowned kings on nights like this and let its people suffer in silence every other night of the year. She could not kneel to that, not even for him. "I can't," Elena said, her voice steady even as her hands trembled. "I won't." A gasp went through the hall. The crown-bearer nearly dropped the cushion. Kale's hand, still outstretched, slowly lowered. "Elena," he said quietly, "do you understand what you are refusing?" "I understand exactly what I'm refusing," she said. "I've spent years patching up what this crown allows to happen. I won't wear it. I'm sorry." And then, before the shock could turn into anything else, she turned and walked out of the hall, her footsteps echoing against stone, as 300 wolves watched her go. The elder council did not take her defiance lightly. Within the hour, before the moon had even set, they gathered to declare her refusal an insult not just to Kale, but to the pack itself. No one refused a fated bond in the middle of a coronation. No one turned their back on the crown in front of the entire territory. By their law, such an act demanded punishment, and the punishment they chose was exile, immediate and absolute. Elena would leave Nightfall Land by sunrise and never return. They expected Kale to accept this outcome, perhaps with private grief but public composure. A king could not chase after a woman who had humiliated him before his own people. That was not how things were done. They underestimated him. Kale stood before the council that same night, still dressed in his ceremonial clothes, and said the words that would upend everything. "If she is exiled, then I am leaving with her." The room erupted. Elders shouted over one another. His closest advisor, a gray-haired wolf named Tobias, who had served Kale's father before him, grabbed his arm as if to physically hold him in place. "You cannot mean this! You are the Alpha King!" "The pack needs you." "The pack has needed a lot of things I couldn't give it," Kale said. "Maybe it's time someone else tried." He removed the ceremonial ring from his finger, the one that marked him as heir to the throne, and set it on the council table, Then he walked out, just as Elena had, leaving behind 300 stunned faces and a throne with no one sitting in it. He found her at the edge of the territory, near the old stone bridge that marked the border, packing what little she owned into a worn leather bag. She looked up when she heard him approach, startled, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "You shouldn't be here," she finally said. "You have a kingdom." "Not anymore," he said. "I gave it up." Elena's bag slipped from her fingers. "You what?" "I'm not going to force you to be my queen, Elena. I'm not going to make you kneel for a crown you believe is built on suffering, but I'm also not going to let you walk into exile alone, not when the bond between us is real, whether either of us asked for it or not." He stepped closer. "So I'm coming with you, not as your king, just as myself." She stared at him, searching his face for some sign that this was a trick, a temporary madness that would fade by morning. She found none. Only quiet certainty. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he said. "I know you'd rather lose everything than stay silent about what's wrong. That tells me plenty." They crossed the border together as the sun rose, two wolves with nothing but what they carried on their backs, leaving behind a kingdom that suddenly had no king. The months that followed were harder than either of them had imagined. Exile was not a punishment with clear edges. It was a slow erosion of comfort, day after day. They lived first in an abandoned cabin near the forest's northern edge, patching holes in the roof with bark and mud, hunting for food when the weather allowed, going hungry when it didn't. Kale, who had spent his life being served, learned to chop wood until his hands blistered, and then healed, and then blistered again. Elena, who had always been the one giving comfort to others, found herself comforted in turn, in small ways, a shared blanket on cold nights, a steady presence when nightmares of the coronation hall still woke her gasping. Scouts from Nightfall found them twice in those early months, sent by the council to make sure the exile held. Both times, Kale stood between them and Elena, not with threats, but with a calm refusal to be intimidated that unsettled the scouts more than any show of force could have. Word spread back to the pack that the former king had not softened in exile. If anything, he seemed more certain of himself than he ever had on the throne. Slowly, without either of them planning it, they built something neither the crown nor the old hierarchy had ever offered, a partnership where neither one ruled over the other. Kale began to understand what Elena had tried to tell him in the Great Hall, the things a king surrounded by silk and ceremony rarely saw. How a system built on strength alone crushed the ones who could not fight back. How fear, disguised as respect, kept an entire pack silent about its own wounds. Elena, in turn, began to see the weight Kale had carried since childhood, trained from birth to lead, but never once asked whether he wanted to, and she came to understand that giving it up had not been a loss for him. It had felt, for the first time in his life, like freedom. They were not building a life to reclaim anything. They were simply building a life. Back in Nightfall territory, that life without a king was proving difficult in its own way. Kale's cousin Marcus, ambitious and cold where Kale had been steady and fair, had been installed as regent by the council, eager to prove himself worthy of a permanent crown. He ruled with a heavier hand than Kale ever had, tightening laws, punishing dissent, rewarding loyalty over fairness. Within half a year, the same wolves who had once gasped at Elena's refusal in the Great Hall were whispering something different in dark corners, that the wrong wolf had left, and the wrong wolf now sat in his place. It was Tobias, the gray-haired advisor who had once grabbed Kale's arm to stop him from leaving, who finally set out to find them. He arrived at the edge of their small camp on a gray autumn morning, older and more tired than Kale remembered, and dropped to one knee before either of them could speak. "The pack is suffering," Tobias said without preamble. "Marcus rules through fear. Families are afraid to ask for help. Punishments have grown harsher for smaller offenses. We need you back, Kale. Not as the king who left, as the king who might actually listen." Kale glanced at Elena before answering. It was a small thing, that glance, but it said everything about how far they had come, that he would not decide their future without her. "If I go back," he said slowly, "it won't be the same as before. I won't rule alone, and I won't rule the way my father did, or his father before him. If Elena comes with me, she comes as an equal, not a prize handed a crown at the end of a ceremony. Tobias looked between them, and something like relief crossed his weathered face. The council may not accept that easily. Then the council will have to learn, Elena said quietly. That night, alone by their small fire, Elena turned the decision over in her mind, long after Cale had gone still and quiet beside her, watching the flames. She had walked away from that crown because she could not bear what it represented. Now she was being asked to walk back toward it, not as a symbol to be paraded before a hall of silk and gold, but as someone with the power to actually change what happened after the ceremony ended, after the crowd went home, after the doors of the great hall closed for the night. I'm afraid, she admitted finally, that if I go back, I'll become part of the very thing I refused. Cale took her hand, his grip warm and certain. Then don't let it change you. Let us change it instead. It was not a promise that erased her fear, but it was enough to carry her forward. They returned to Nightfall territory 2 days later, walking through the same gates Elena had once left through in disgrace, and this time, no one gasped in shock. Word had already spread of what had happened under Marcus's regency, and there was something like hope in the faces that watched them pass. Hope, and a cautious kind of relief. The council meeting that followed was tense, filled with arguments about tradition and precedent and the proper order of things. But Tobias spoke in their favor, and so did wolves from the lower quarters who had heard, through whispers and rumor, that a healer once stood in the great hall and refused a crown because she could not accept what it cost the people beneath it. When it was Elena's turn to speak, she did not ask for forgiveness for her refusal. She spoke, instead of what she had seen in her years as a healer, of wounds that never should have happened, and of a pack that deserved leaders who listened before they punished. By the end of that long night, the council agreed to something that had never been done before in Nightfall's history, a shared crown, not one placed on a single head above the pack, but 2 rulers standing together, answerable to each other as much as to their people. There was no grand coronation this time, no hall full of silk and silver light, no crown-bearer with a velvet cushion, just Cale and Elena, standing together at the edge of the territory, where they had once left everything behind, looking out at the land they had returned to change. No kneeling this time, Cale said, a small smile touching his mouth. No, Elena agreed, taking his hand. This time, we walk in side by side. And together, they did.